Your net worth gives you a snapshot of your financial health. To calculate net worth, subtract all your debt from your total cash and other assets. Assets include money in the bank, plus the market value of your investments, along with equity in your home, vehicles, and other property. Based on data from the U.S. Federal Reserve, Americans hold a combined total of $160.35 trillion in wealth. But this money is far from evenly divided. The average net worth for Americans is $1.06 million, driven up by billionaires in the top 1% who hold more than 30% of America's combined wealth, as previously reported by Go Banking Rates. The median household net worth, on the other hand, is a mere $192,700. That's what those directly in the middle hold. With 340.11 million people in the US as of the last census, if we were to divide wealth evenly across America, every person, including children, would receive $471,465. But how would this affect the economy? I asked ChatGPT what would happen to the economy if every American had the same net worth. Here is what I found. How would it affect the US economy if every person received close to $500,000? A sudden universal distribution of $471,000 per person would trigger one of the most profound economic shocks in U.S. history. You'd see a sharp spike in consumer spending as people rush to pay off debts, buy homes, upgrade lifestyles, or enjoy new wealth. That kind of demand surge could overstimulate the economy, driving rapid inflation. People would rush to pay off student loans, medical bills, credit cards. Families that have rented their whole lives might suddenly place bids on homes, pushing property prices even higher. Imagine millions of people walking into car dealerships at once, ready to buy. It would be a spending frenzy, and the prices of goods and services would soar to match the demand. On the flip side, the distribution would likely reduce poverty almost instantly. Homelessness could drop. People would have the means to leave abusive households, access better health care, and send their children to better schools. Social mobility could increase dramatically, and the wealth gaps that have persisted for generations, especially along racial and class lines, might finally begin to close. But it wouldn't be all smooth sailing. A one-time injection of cash doesn't change economic systems. If everyone starts with the same, what happens next depends on how they manage it. Without guidance, a lot of people might spend through it quickly and find themselves right back where they started, just with higher prices surrounding them. How would it affect the world economy? The ripple effects would be global. If inflation in the US rose sharply, the Federal Reserve might respond by raising interest rates, which would tighten global credit conditions. In short, global trade would see a burst of demand, but financial markets might wobble under the pressure of such a dramatic change in asset ownership. If Americans start importing more due to newfound wealth, it boosts demand in manufacturing hubs like China, Vietnam, and India. Oil prices could climb as more people travel and drive. Global shipping lanes would get overwhelmed. Stock markets might initially rise due to higher sales, but uncertainty would creep in. The dollar would come under intense scrutiny. As the world's reserve currency, its stability matters far beyond U.S. borders. If inflation isn't controlled quickly, the value of the dollar could weaken, shaking foreign economies that hold U.S. debt or rely on exports to American consumers. In essence, this wealth shift wouldn't just change lives in the U.S., it would jolt the entire global economic structure. And depending on how the transition is handled, it could either inspire a wave of similar reforms or plunge other nations into chaos. How could the transfer of wealth actually take place, given that so much of the 1%'s wealth is held in stocks and investments? That's the billion-dollar logistical question. Much of the 1%'s wealth is tied up in equities, private businesses, real estate, and other non-cash assets. To redistribute this wealth, the government would likely have to impose a one-time wealth tax or a forced asset sale, converting a portion of high-value holdings into cash or government-backed tokens for distribution. But doing this without tanking the markets would be tricky. Imagine if Jeff Bezos had to sell off 50% of Amazon stock tomorrow. The stock would crash, and so would a huge chunk of investor wealth tied to it. Pension funds, 401ks, and everyday retirement accounts would suffer collateral damage. One workaround might be issuing digital credits backed by government-controlled assets. Basically, a new kind of universal currency temporarily used to divide up equity fairly. Another option could be time-locked wealth transfers, where the money is distributed in phases to prevent overspending and inflation. But even then, the legal battles would be intense. Property rights are baked deep into the American legal system. The wealthy would fight back, politically, legally, and economically. It's not just about money, it's about power, influence, and control over institutions. What would people do for a living? We'd likely see a wave of early retirements, career changes, and sabbaticals. But over time, the novelty would wear off and people would re-enter the workforce, driven by purpose, ambition, or the eventual depletion of their funds. Imagine your favorite barista deciding to open a painting studio, your Uber driver moving to Montana to start a family farm. People would finally have the breathing space to do what they want, at least for a while. You'd see a short-term drop in workforce participation, especially in high-stress and low-paying jobs. But this creates a new problem. Who will do the work society still needs? Nurses, teachers, grocery clerks, garbage collectors. These aren't glamorous jobs, but they're essential. If no one wants to take them, cities could collapse. To fix that, wages would have to increase significantly for these roles. You might see janitors making $80,000 a year, factory workers pulling in six figures. In the long term, automation would accelerate. Robots and AI might fill the gaps left by human workers who opt out. However, the economy isn't just about survival. Eventually, people crave structure, community, and purpose. Many would come back to work, but in roles that matter to them personally, not just for survival. And that shift in motivation could lead to a healthier, happier workforce. How might daily life change in the US? If everyone had the same net worth, day-to-day life would look radically different for a while. Income inequality would shrink overnight, and the stigma around poverty could fade. Neighborhoods might become more economically integrated. Access to healthcare, education, and homeownership could expand dramatically. You'd no longer be able to tell someone's background by their zip code. Luxury might become less flashy and more personal. Streets in formerly neglected neighborhoods could be lined with new businesses, better schools, and cleaner parks. Mental health would improve. People would be less stressed, less afraid of losing everything overnight. But over time, new hierarchies would likely emerge. People would still make different choices about saving, spending, and investing. Some would grow their wealth, others would spend through it. It's human nature. Someone might use their money to start a successful tech company, while another blows it all on impulsive purchases. And slowly, the wealth gap would start to widen again, unless the system itself changes. Unless there's education, support, and ongoing policies that promote equity, we'd likely see inequality return, just in a different form. Think of it like a Monopoly game. You can reset the board and give everyone $500 to start, but within a few hours, someone ends up with Boardwalk, and someone else is back to zero. That's not because the game is broken. It's because the rules haven't changed. Asking what would happen if every American had the same net worth is more than just a thought experiment. It's a window into the systems we live under, the way money shapes our lives, and how deeply inequality is embedded into our economy. Distributing $471,000 to every American could lift millions out of poverty, offer new beginnings, and transform communities. But it would also introduce massive risks, from inflation to labor shortages to the rebirth of inequality in new forms. True wealth isn't just about what you're given. It's about what you know, how you grow it, and the systems in place that help or hurt you along the way.